Oh man, here they come again.
Here they come again. This still has skin on the skull. This carousel, and your interaction with Alfred Watkins, is there a possibility that, I mean, given what you know about Alfred, I think you said he died in the 30s.
1935.
1935. That's the year my grandfather was born. And he writes this book. You see him in 82, I believe you said, right?
81.
81 in the park. Like, is there a chance that, and he's staring at the carousel. You're on the carousel, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So like, is there a chance in your understanding, your thoughts on the idea of this carousel opening a portal where literally people from other times and realms could transcend? I mean, are we talking like that's a possibility here in your mind?
I'm talking like it is. I talk about that in the book. In fact, I offer, I believe, 4 possibilities to explain Alfred. Number 1, it's all just a coincidence. He's just an old guy who happens to look just like this Alfred Watkins guy. And it was all just a coincidence, number 1. Number 2, that it was a tulpa, you know, the being that's created from, you know, human focus and concentration. The problem with that is I had never heard of Alfred Watkins back then, so it couldn't have been a tulpa that I generated. Then there is the idea of a very interesting group of people that have shown up one way or another. This boggles my mind still. They have shown up one way or another in every single one of my nonfiction lines of research that I've written books about. Even things that I think, well, they would have nothing to do with this. Sure enough, something to do with them shows up. Who are they? Well, they're called the Tuatha Dé Danann. And they're traditionally associated with what we call the fairy lore, the fairy world. They're interdimensionals, okay? Now, here's what's interesting is, remember I told you when I gave him my ticket, he was incredibly, exceedingly thankful. Well, I learned after that, you know, over the years, and I had never heard of the Tuatha Dé Danann until the late 80s in a Jacques Vallée book on UFOs. But in 1981, I'd never heard of them. Well, one of the things that the fairy world, the interdimensionals do, is if you're generous, they're very grateful. They love when human beings are generous and bestow upon them a gift. And I interpret my just giving him my passport ticket as, you know, I had, unbeknownst to me, this is in the interdimensional possibility, he was an interdimensional making himself appear as this Alfred Watkins guy. And I'll get to more on that in a moment. But because I had simply given him the ticket, I had sacrificed my passport ticket, given it to him. That was some type of landmark test of character that I pass with this interdimensional, possibly Tuatha Dé Danann being. And so what they do is they then give you a blessing. Why would he appear as somebody I didn't know about, right? I didn't know anything in 1981 about ley lines. I didn't know anything about Alfred Watkins. But why would he appear as Alfred Watkins? Because, as Alan Bates' character says in Mothman Prophecies, these beings, from their perspective, they can see just a little farther down the road. And my thinking gives me goosebumps. Again, sorry, it's a reaction I have when talking about certain things. I think the reason that it would have this interdimensional if it was an interdimensional, a Tuatha Dé Danann, I think the reason it appeared as Alfred Watkins was because it knew 11 years later that I would see that book and I would recognize Alfred. So in that particular possibility, I was encountering directly the Tuatha Dé Danann, and they have made themselves their presence known to me in subsequent years from time to time at different instances. They've let me know they're out there. Even when I think, okay, it's gone, it's past, they've forgotten about it. No, there they are. And they knew that I would, see him and recognize this and then want to pull threads. So that's the third possibility. As I said, there was just coincidence. And there's tulpa, which couldn't have been a tulpa that I generated. And then there's Tuatha Dé Danann. Now, the fourth possibility, these are the possibilities I talk about in the book. The fourth is the literal one. And I love the idea of interacting with the Tuatha Dé Danann. I truly do. But I also love the idea that it was just a portal and it was the real Alfred Watkins. And here's why I add that possibility. Remember, I told you this man was looking around like this was the most amazing place he had ever seen. Like he was stunned, almost like back in 1927 when he was doing the research for his 1928 book. Maybe there he was walking along the ley lines.
Oh, man.
And he stepped 45, or it was more than, because he died 45 years before I saw him. But you get my idea. He stepped decades ahead in time and space, found himself in Disneyland, wondering what the hell is this place, and here's this knucklehead who just keys in on him and who is this guy? And, so that in the book, I talk about that being my personal favorite possibility. But
absolutely.
That was at the time I wrote the book. Since then, I've elevated that equally favorite is an encounter with the Tuatha Dé Danann, because they, once you encounter them, they don't go, not completely. You see them again, so to speak.
That's interesting.
They certainly have continually popped up in my path of research and in my life. So those are the four possibilities to explain Alfred. And
well, listen, as much as I like the Tuatha Dé Danann, okay, let's pause for a second and just really take in the fact that I said that on the first try. That was actually quite impressive by me. Good job, me. But as much as I like the idea, Alfred showing up in 1981, that's my favorite personally. Okay, we were talking about theories and who's I don't care about the tulpa idea, the coincidence not happening. I like the idea that Alfred. Now, do we know, was Alfred in the California area? Do you know that at all?
Not that I ever found. I never found where he had ever come to California.
So do you think that it's possible, theoretically speaking, that if somebody is at one of these intersecting points on these ley lines, let's just say, would Stonehenge be one of those intersecting points?
Honestly, I have not. My guy has not done an analysis of Stonehenge. But it's a good question.
Okay.
He should, and I can let you know another time down the road. But I get where you're going. The idea is where there are other intersections, can such extraordinary things happen? And I think so. I think that's what those guys who noticed that where there's these intersections of this energy, there are more reports of UFOs, Bigfoot, ghosts, paranormal activity. So there's something going on where these intersections are, and portals certainly could be one of them.
Yeah, no, I 100% love that theory. So if this is a portal, and I'm assuming that you've at least theoretically thought about, if not looked into these ideas. Do you, outside of Disneyland and the carousel, and even, the ley lines, do you have you come across, have you looked into, maybe found other evidences that man can generate and create physical devices that can then generate portals? I mean, is that something that you think is very much well within the range outside of the carousel, Disneyland, and the ley lines?
I think so. I think that, see, I am long overdue on a follow-up to the Latitude 33 book, because here's what I think's going on. And I think this serves to answer your question, part of it anyway. I think that C.V. Wood got this idea from a previous, from previous knowledge of a secret tradition. And I don't want to make that sound so big and ominous, but I think there was a group of people at the turn of the century, 19th into the 20th, who were doing this with carousels, because subsequent research, we have found other old carousels located on these intersections, or even on just one line going through. But we have found carousels located on this energy, old carousels. And so I think that C.V. Wood learned about this from, some other source that was aware of somebody doing this. And that's what my follow-up book, I've wanted it to be about for years, is to try to find out who it is. And I've been on that trail, and they've really, really covered their tracks deeply. But and I ended up writing, by the way, a time travel novel in which the character uses the carousels to go through time and space. And what's interesting is this novel and its publication predates the movie Now You See Us, or whatever, about the magicians, where it ends with the carousel and they jump interdimensionally. Someone saw that movie and they said, "Hey, Walter, I think they read your book." And I watched it. I'm like, "Oh yeah, okay, that's pretty accurate to how it would be." And the reason I wrote that is because I do think I tell people all the time, don't ignore the fiction written by nonfiction researchers, because there are ideas that we can't rightfully put in our nonfiction that we still want to get down and we want to explore, but we want to get down on paper. We want to explore it. We want the concept out there. So I put those kinds of things in my fiction. And this novel in particular, has the result of my experience with this Disneyland thing and with researching it and writing it and what I think is going on. It's dramatized, of course, but I think this is something that there's somebody out there that has known about this, and they've been putting these carousels like a network, and one idea is the idea that if you know how to do it, you can get on these carousels and go from one place to another interdimensionally, time and space, we're talking. And what's interesting is tomorrow, this is recorded for later, but I'm going to be doing an upcoming episode on my show where we talk about transtemporal cosmic phenomena. And we're going to be talking about this human factor. What is it that a human being can do to be part of this mechanism that makes it functional? And that's really what we're talking about here, is what did C.V. Wood understand about the human mind? What did he, in my opinion, Disneyland was engineered with the human consciousness as the key that makes it go, or the, and maybe if I'm getting that wrong, but you get the idea that you plug in the human consciousness factor, and that's when the magic starts. So to answer your question, I think there is something, and I've gotten this out of diving into time travel studies. There is something specifically powerful about the human will, okay, and the desire to do this plays an operative function in going across time and space. In other words, if you have some emotional hook, right, at your destination, like in the film Somewhere in Time, it's because he falls in love with an actress who lived 100 years before. So this romantic love is his anchor point to the past. So that's the thing that he's connected to emotionally. So when you combine the emotion with the desire and the mind power, you are able to pull yourself through time and space. And I think that's the human factor. How did he do it? He surrounded himself with the trappings of the past, the target, time, and place. Okay. That's the mechanism. Jack Finney writes about this in his novel, Time and Again, where the time traveler just surrounds himself with, a place, the furnishings, the clothing, the music, the sounds, so that his mind locks into that target time and his will is able to do the rest. So there's something about this technology I think I'm finding and seeing that requires, the human consciousness to be that final little piece to plug in. If any of that made sense.
No, it totally makes sense. And I'm finding that with the people that I talk to about these types of things, there's a common thread of the mind that is a piece of this puzzle that I think traditionally has been overlooked. Like we have traditionally thought, and maybe through science fiction and things, like let's just create a device that you sit in, hit the power button, and it generates up and it takes us away. But there's a real aspect to the mind that I've even started. I don't want to say I coined the phrase, but there's an author that heard me say it and said he wants to write a book with me based off this phrase, this idea of mind portals. Like the mind is a portal itself, and I don't know how to totally convey it into words. But like you said, that the brain is the key, and it's almost in that terminology. It's like the technology, the carousel, the know-how is the doorway, but the brain and the will is the key to open that doorway.
Yeah, the key to the kingdom is the individual person going to the park. Each one of us, back when it was engaged before they moved the carousel, each individual going to the park, adult or child, brought their consciousness, and that was the key to really turn on the machine, and engage it. That's the word I was looking for. You engage the human consciousness and will in there, and yeah.
Do you think that they moved the carousel on purpose? They wanted to shut that whole thing down?
I think it was out of. I would think that. I'm convinced that there's somebody in the Disney organization that knew and understood what C.V. Wood did, but I don't think that by the time you got to the 1980s, I don't think the people, because they were revamping Fantasyland, and I don't think they realized what they were doing. They just needed the carousel moved back for the architecture of the new stuff, and that's what happened, and they disengaged it. But I had a thought that I want to go back to so I don't forget it. On what you were just saying, the mind being a portal, the question that comes up is, well, shoot, how come people aren't constantly doing this? And well, the one answer to that is, we know that there's people out there that know about this stuff, and we know that there's suppression that goes on. Well, when you're talking about the power of the mind, one of the strongest ways to lock that down and block it is to just condition people to think, oh, that's not real. Oh, you can't do those kinds of things. Oh, that's childish. Oh, that's not. So what you do is you attack the belief. You attack the human capacity for thinking, hey, could I do this? Should I try it? If you want to keep people suppressed from doing this, you just tell them they can't and you condition them, and it works. I mean, look how many people laugh at these ideas, when we're talking about them, because they've been conditioned that that's all nonsense. And it doesn't help that in our community, ever since, this community's been a thing for decades and a century or whatever, there's always been liars and fakers and goofballs who are telling BS stories. It doesn't help when you're trying to have a serious conversation about this, that it's got so much going against it. Well, that serves the function of suppressing these kinds of abilities and these ideas.